Today's shiur begins at the second wide line on Daf Samach Gimel. You'll notice there is a Mishnah. On the side of the Gemara, under our topic heading, we have a Nosei Klali, a general topic heading that will last till Daf Samach Daled Amud Beis, and it's called Moredes. This refers to a woman that is rebellious. Now, exactly in what facet of their married life is she rebellious, that the Gemara will discuss. So now the Mishnah. Hamoredes al Bala, a woman who rebels against her husband. Pochasin lo miksubasa, we reduce, we subtract from the amount she would be entitled to through her ksuba, shiva dinorim b'Shabbos, 7 dinar per week. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shiva tarpeikin. Rabbi Yehuda cites a different type of currency. The Gemara will have to explain what that is. Bearing in mind that the basic ksuba is 200 zuz. So this is a fraction of that amount that will be reduced per week. Ad mosai hu poches. How far do we go with this reduction? So there are two opinions. Number one, ad keneged ksubasa. We figure only the basic ksuba. Like we just mentioned, the basic ksuba is 200 zuz in the case of a virgin marriage, or it may have been 100 zuz if she was a widow when she got married. But we don't figure in the additional amounts that were written into the ksuba that we call the toisefes ksuba. Rashi on this point mentions ad kedei ksubasa v'achar kach noisein lo get v'yoytza below ksuba. At that point, if she remains rebellious, and we've followed Shabbos after Shabbos where we do the 7 dinar reduction, when we reach the point that amount, the total reduced amount is the equivalent of her basic ksuba, she receives a divorce, a get, and she leaves without receiving any ksuba. Aval eino mashe livsoik al hanechosim shenoflu la mibeis aviyah ulahafsida mimena. But we don't continue the reduction beyond the basic ksuba amount, which would then start covering the properties that she may have received from her father's house, and to cause her a loss of those. The Mishnah continues, Rabbi Yossi Omer li'olam hu poches v'holech ad she'im nafla lo yerusha b'malkam acher goyve heimena. Rabbi Yossi says that we continue reducing whatever amount is in the ksuba, even if it's amounts that she received from her father's house. That amount is figured, and we delay the divorce until we cover the entire amount of the ksuba. The Mishnah continues, V'chein hamored al ishto mosifin al ksubasa. Likewise, a husband that rebels against his wife, we entitle her to collect more than she originally was to receive at the point of their marriage. Shlosha dinarim b'Shabbos. Every week, as long as this husband is rebellious, every week 3 dinar are added to her ksuba. And that's an added obligation on the husband. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Shlosha tarpeikin. And Rabbi Yehuda, again, he cites in his presentation, in his opinion, a different currency, a different amount, 3 tarpeikin. As we turn to the Gemara, we notice on the side a topic heading, the Nosei, Yesh levarer mimahi moredes. When Mishnah says she is rebellious, well, from what aspect of their married life is she being rebellious? So we'll see one possibility, she's moredes mitashma, she refuses to engage in intimacy. A second possibility is moredes mimalacha, she refuses to work, she refuses to create income. Or she refuses to do the tasks that are incumbent upon a wife, as we saw in our previous shiurim. The Gemara asks, Moredes mimai, what is she rebelling from? Rav Huna Amar mitash mishamita, she refuses to engage in intimacy. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Chanina Amar milulacha, she refuses to engage in those activities that are incumbent upon her. You'll notice there are triangles. One is here, and a few lines later, under the Mivneh heading on the side, we feature a triangle, and we indicate Mekoros Shemarim Shamoredes Mitashmish Nechsheves Moredes. We're going to bring sources that would seem to indicate that the term Moredes is a Moredes rebellious with regard to the realm of intimacy. Tnan V'chein HaMored Al Ishto. The Mishnah parallels the scenario of rebelling of the husband, parallels that to the wife rebelling. According to the interpretation of Rav Huna, that Moredes is a reference to Tashmish. So then this section of the Mishnah L'chai means fine, it's good, it makes sense that the husband also could be rebellious in that realm. But as far as a rebellion from incumbent activities, does the husband have any incumbent activities upon him to perform? So the Gemara says, there is a scenario where mored of the husband's rebellion can be understood in these terms. Biomer, where a husband says, Eini zon v'eini mefarnes. I refuse to supply, to support and sustain my wife. And as the Mishnah says, if a husband were to say that, then we'll add 3 dinar per week to the ksuba. The Gemara asks, V'omar Rav, but didn't Rav say, Oimer eini zon v'eini mefarnes yotzi v'itein ksuba? That if a husband makes such a harsh declaration as, I refuse to support and sustain my wife, he is to divorce her and pay her ksuba. And the question the Gemara is asking is rooted in the implication of the word yotzi. He is to divorce her. And it sounds that motzi means immediately. And yet our Mishnah was describing mored al ish, to a husband that's rebellious. It's not an immediate divorce, rather it's an addition, a week after week addition to the ksuba. So the Gemara says that this assumption of yotzi meant we force a divorce, an immediate divorce, is not accurate. V'lav l'imluchi bei boi. Rashi says v'lav l'imluchi bei shemo yachzor. Maybe he'll have a change of mind and not be rebellious anymore. B'soch zman shonu nimlochin bo u'mechazrin olav shi'achzor bo mosifin al ksuba. And during this interim period of time when we're trying to influence him to change his mind, so each week that goes by, he is accruing a greater debt toward the ksuba. So the expression of imluchi bei means is it not so that we have to talk to him, to consult with him, to convince him? And so during that time period, as we said, that's what the Mishnah is saying. We will be adding a certain amount per week that the Baal, the husband, will be obligated to pay in addition to the basic ksuba. So at this point in the Gemara, we don't have a clear explanation as to what moredes means. Meisvei. Again, we try to show from a source that moredes means from tashmish. The source says, Achasli arusa unesua. When we say the term achasli means the following are all the same. They're all the same regarding the issue of moredes, regarding the issue of rebellion. So that concept of rebellion applies equally to an arusa, an nesua. An arusa is a woman who entered the first stage of marriage with her husband, did not consummate it, and at that point she's moredes, or nesua, vafilu nida, vafilu choila, even if she is a menstruant woman, even if she's infirmed, vafilu shomeres yavam, even a shomeres yavam. This is a woman who is waiting for a brother-in-law to marry her after her own husband died, leaving no children. So now, as you can see, the printers have a parentheses. We skip to the bottom line. Bishlomo l'madam ritashmish. If you say that the concept of moredis applies to tashmish, so then this source will make sense. And I just want to point out that it's true that the case of nida is featured in here, but Rashi explains that nida doesn't present any problem with regard to tashmish, because the nida will become she'll become available for tashmish when the clean period, when the purification period arrives. So as far as the Manda Omar, the one that explains moredes, and the source, the triangle source that we just read, has to do with moredes. So it makes sense if you're talking about intimacy. Hainu dikotoni choila, a woman who's infirmed. She's infirm. She's capable, though, of being participant in tashmish. Ella lamanda. We continue at the top of Amud Beis. Ella lamanda omar mi malacha. But to explain that moredes deals with a woman who's rebelling from performing the activities that are incumbent upon her. Chayla bas malachi, a woman who's infirmed, she's someone who's capable of doing malacha, that she could be described as a moredes if she decides not to do so. So the source we just read, Elo mitashmish kuli amalo pligi dahavya mored. As far as the Tanaic source we just read, everyone will agree that you have to be talking about moredes from tashmish, and everyone agrees that is considered a moredes. He pligi, we have a machlokes amoroyim mimolocha. A woman who is moredes, who refuses to do the activities incumbent upon her, is that called a moredes? Mar sovar mimolocha lo havya moredes. That would be Rav Huna, who said that she's a moredes from tashmish, but not from molocha. And Mor sovar, that would be Rav Yossi Berbi Chanina, holds mimolocha nami havya moredes. If she refuses to perform the incumbent tasks, that also is grounds for calling her a moredes. Before we continue in the Gemara itself, we glance at the side. We have a topic heading, Hatipul, the way we deal with the moredes, Shnei Tkufos. You'll see historically in halachic development there were two periods. Number one, Borishona, the first stage was Pochasin Zayin Tarpikin L'Shavua. We saw in terms of Rabbi Yehuda that it was 7 Tarpikin per week was reduced from the Ksuba of a Moredes. And number two, the second stage, Hachrozois B'meshech Arba Shabbosos, announcements that are made, we'll see they're made publicly in shul, in the synagogue, over a period of 4 weeks, zu achar zu, 4 consecutive weeks. Ve'achar kach mafsidin lo kol ksubasa, and after the passage of 4 weeks, she loses everything. That represents the second period in halachic development regarding the way we deal with a moredes. The Gemara. Gufa, hamoredes al baila, a woman who rebels against her husband, pochas in law miksubasa shiva dinarim b'shabbos, an amount of 7 dinar is reduced from the ksuba per week. Rabbi Yehuda Omer shiva tarpikin. Rabbi Yehuda says 7 tarpikin is the amount that's reduced per week. Rabboseinu chazru v'nimnu. The rabbis then later they reconsidered and then established shiu machrizin olel arba shabbosos, that there should be an announcement of over the course of 4 weeks. And we should glance, by the way, at Rashi's second line from the top, chazru v'nimnu shelo yishu oisa livchois mat, not to delay the dissolution of this marriage and have a small amount reduced week after week. Elo yafsidu al kol ksubos lachar b'shabbosos shel hachroza. Rather, after 4 weeks of announcing, hoping that the woman will have a change of mind, after those 4 weeks pass, she then loses everything. So we continue in the Gemara itself. They had this latter enactment that they should machriz 4 weeks. Zu achar zu, we said consecutive weeks. V'sholchin lo bezdin, and then the court sends a message. Havi yodas, you should know, she'afilu ksubosech mea mona hifsadet. Even if your ksuba is 100 mona, which is a very large amount of money, you will lose everything. Achasli, and here you see a quote of in this more complete brisa that we had seen earlier. Achasli aruso nesua afilu nida afilu chola afilu shameres yavam. And we pointed out that this source is a reference to a moredis from Tasha Shamita, because the chola was mentioned. Question: Omar lei Reb Chia bar Yosef l'Shmuel. Reb Chia asks, and this is a point we skirted over before. We mentioned that it's no problem, but here he's raising that very question. We just said that moredes is a woman who rebels against intimacy. She refuses to participate. And her refusal is grounds for calling her rebellious. But in this source, we saw amongst the different women mentioned, a nida. So Rabbi Chia asks Shmuel, nida bas tashmishi, is the menstruant woman someone who halacha allows to participate in tashmish, so that her refusal as a nida isn't a refusal of rebellion, it's the halacha itself prohibits the intimacy. Omar lei, so Shmuel answered, a woman, even though she is a nida, but she says, I refuse to engage in intimacy, that's a bigger problem. The fact that she adds the statement that creates the problem, where the nidus itself isn't a problem. Eino yidoima, you cannot compare mishi yeshlo pas pesalo lemishi einlo pas pesalo. A person, let's say, who is fasting. Is it difficult for a person to fast? Well, it's all a matter of psychology. If a person knows that he has food in his bread in the bread basket, he knows that he has food, so he doesn't tend to become as hungry as someone that doesn't have any food. So too over here, the woman, though she's prohibited in intimacy because she's a nida, the husband doesn't feel any setback by that, because he knows that after the nida period lapses, he will be mutar, he will be able to be with her in intimacy. However, a woman who declares her opposition to being with her husband as a married couple, a woman who declares her objection, her rebellion against her husband, so that is a bigger pain. That's considered a source, or that's considered reason enough to call her a moredes. Omar Romi Bar Chama, ein machrizin olel elo bebotei knesiyos ubebotei midrashos. Reference was made to a hachroza. I was the Rabbeinu Nimnu Chazar Nimnu, that hachroza should take place. Now that hachroza, he points out, is to take place in synagogues or Torah study centers, Batei Midrashos. Omar Rava Daika Nami, by careful reading of the Tanaic literature, you see that the hachroza is in such a place. Dekotoni arba shabboses zu achar zu. It was mentioned that the rebellion, the tolerated rebellion period, is 4 weeks, namely where we maybe tolerated as overstating things, but it's the period in which we wait to see if she'll have a change of mind. And it mentioned in the source 4 shabboses. What is unique about shabboses, of in this case meaning Saturdays? What's unique about that? Those are days that everyone gets together in synagogues, and those are Shabbos is a day in which there's no malacha, so people will be aware, they'll be focused on the announcement that's being made. Shema Mina. So this is sufficient, proof or support for Rami Bar Chama's point. Omar Rami Bar Chama, Pamayim Sholchin Law Bezdin. We send a message to her from the court twice. What do we mean by twice? Achas kodim hachroza v'achas li'achar hachroza. One before the announcement is made. It's a message that says, it's a warning to the lady, we're going to make an announcement about your behavior, and then a message is sent to her, we have made that announcement. My impression is that all of this is we'll call it a pressure tactic, all to get her to have a change of mind. And also it informs the public that when she eventually is divorced and isn't receiving a ksuba, it will be well known why that happened. Dorash Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda halacha keraboisenu Omar Rava, and when we say, by the way, halacha keraboisenu, we're referring to the 4-week approach and not the drawn out 7 dinar per week approach. Rava reacts to this ruling. Omar Rava, hi burcha. What you just said, that we should rule like the Rabbeinu, that's something that's not reliable. By the way, the Rabbeinu reference, there are arrows, so you can see where we saw the Rabbeinu above in the source, besides our simply saying what they said. So Rava says that to rule like the Rabbeinu is a burcha. And the term burcha means something that is not reliable, or something that's not correct. Omar lei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my burcha say. So this is another Rav Nachman. It's Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. He says what's not proper about Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda's ruling, like the Rabbeinu. So Rava answers, Ano amriso nihalei umishmei de gavra rabo amriso nihalei umanu Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina. I said over to him this. I taught him. I said over him this topic, and I said it in the name of a great man, and that was Rabbi Yosi bar Chanina. And that point is that we are not to rule like the Rabbeinu. Ve'ihu keman sovar, Rava, who objected to Rav Nachman bar Rav Chisda's ruling, then who does he hold like? Ki ha di Omar Rava Omar Rav Sheshes halacha nimlochin ba. We have a diamond you can see highlighting the name Rav Sheshes. You'll see that there are 2 opinions in how to, in what Rav Sheshes actually said. So according to Rava, Rav Sheshes tells you that we follow the procedure of Nimlochin ba. Now according to Rashi, Nimlochin means like the original approach of week after week ksuba reduction. There are other opinions as to what this line of the Gemara means, and for those who are interested, you can look into the Tosfos for an alternative approach. But we're accepting Rashi's approach for right now. Rav Huna bar Yehuda Omar Rav Sheshes halacha ein nimlochin ba. So as you can see, the opinion of Rav Sheshes itself is a machlokas between Rava and Rav Huna bar Yehuda. Hechi damya moredes. The Gemara here is asking, what is the case of moredes that we force her through delaying in the get, and we engage in ksuba reduction? What exactly is taking place with regard to the woman? Omar Ameimar, di Omra bo'ino le umitza'arno le. A woman who says, I want to be with him, but I also want to cause him pain. In other words, I personally enjoy the act of intimacy, but I am going to withhold it from him. I'm not going to cooperate with him so as to inflict suffering on him. Avol Omra, but a woman who says Mo'es Olai, it is disgusting to me. I don't want to be with him, and I don't want his ksuba. Mo'es, from the word Mo'us, something that's disgusting. Lo kaifinon law. then there's no forcing in the sense of keeping that, maintaining a delay. We don't try to have them get back together if she makes such a declaration. We don't delay things. We rather give a get to her. The husband gives her a get immediately, and she leaves without a ksuba. Marzutra Omar Kaifinon law. Even in the case of Moesolai, where she declares he is disgusting to me, we still practice the delay method. Hava uvda, an incident like this arose. Ve'achbo Marzutra, and Marzutra forced the couple to stay together. In other words, he imposed the delay approach, and eventually V'nofak minei Rabbi Chanino Misura, the great Rabbi Chanino Misura, was born from that very couple, the couple that Marzutra succeeded in keeping together through imposing the delay approach, even though the woman had said Mo'e Solai. So the Gemara is citing this as proof to Marzutra's approach as the better approach. In other words, look at the results from being kofeh, from kaifinon law, lahashoisa, to delay in the giving of the get, when through that delay the couple had intimacy with one another, and from that union was born Rabbi Chanino Misura. Sounds pretty convincing. Velo he, and that's not so. In other words, from the results of keeping them together, that does not prove that that's the way we should practice. Hasam siato dishmaya have. There, it's a function of heavenly assistance. There, it's heavenly intervention. In other words, that you have positive results from of this positive results of this nature that involve divine intervention. That does not show us how halacha is to be decided. As we go on in the Gemara, we're going to notice a house shape, and they're listed as Aleph and Beis. On the side of them, under the Nosei, the Nosei Mivne heading, where we have a topic heading combined with a structural note, we've indicated Shnei Lishonos Be'inyan Bloi Begodim Shel HaMoredes Sheniftavu B'Ksubasa. We're going to have two versions concerning truth is that the two versions also involve a little reference to a story, but two versions regarding what we do with the worn out clothing that originally were brought into the marriage. The woman brought in articles of clothing to the marriage, and they were written into the ksuba that she brought in such and such clothing. In the course of time, through wearing them, they get worn out. They're called blo'e, worn out clothing. As far as why would a woman want to have worn out clothing, that's a separate point. But what happens to the worn out clothing of a moredes, those clothing that had been originally written into the ksuba? Their original value, through having assessed their value, that amount had been written into the ksuba, and the worn out articles are still present. What do we do with them? Again, we're focusing on the case of a moredes. Kal Seder Rav Zvid Imrada, the daughter-in-law of Rav Zvid, rebelled. It's interesting to know, just by the way, it has nothing to do with the actual understanding of the Gemara, but do take note of the families that we're talking about. We're talking about extraordinarily great people, and when you look at the line above, Rabbi Chanino Misura, who was a great Amoraic luminary, his parents apparently had a rough time, where she was saying, where his mother was saying to his father at a certain point, I find you disgusting. And things were moved on, and they were together, and this child was born. Here you have Rav Zvid, a very, very great Amora. And here's daughter-in-law, the daughter of Rav Zvid, Imrada. she rebelled against her husband. We're talking about the son of Rav Zvid, and she says, "You're disgusting to me. I don't want to be with you." So that's what happened. Havatfisa chat shira. She had a shira. Rashi says mi'il echad shechnisa la b'ksuba. She had a coat, an article of clothing, an outer garment that she had brought into the marriage. Yosef Ameimar Mazutro Ravashi v'Yosef Rav Gamda Gabayu. So you have three rabbis plus Rav Gamda sitting in their presence. Yasvi Vokamri. They said, Morda ifsida blosea kayomin. A rebellious woman, she loses the clothing that are now worn out, those clothing that she originally brought into the marriage. Rashi says, ifsida blosea kayomin, afilu begodea, shechnisla b'nedid Yosef v'shamu malav, even those articles of clothing that she brought into the marriage and were assessed and their value written into the ksuba v'adaina blois kayomin maf tafsidosam, even those she is to lose. Omar luhu Rav Gamda. So Rav Gamda reacts. Mishum to Rav Zvid Gavra Rabba, because Rav Zvid is a great man, and we're talking about his daughter-in-law losing out. So who's going to benefit? Rav Zvid's son. So you rabbis, because Rav Zvid is a great man, machnefisulai, you're trying to mechanif him. Mechanif is literally to flatter him, but it means to play up to him, to twist the law, to tilt the law to benefit him. V'omar Rav Kahana. Rav Kahana had told us, Mibaya boy Rava v'lo pashit. Rava raised this as a question. Does she lose the blo'oseha kayamin or not? So it's an unresolved question, and here you're taking liberties of ruling in confidence in favor of the family of Rav Zvid. And that's because you're trying to play up to him because he's a great man. He's an important person. Ika Diamri. And now we'll see an opposite version of this story. Yasvi Kamri, another version has the rabbis sitting and ruling. Morda lo hifsida blosa kayamin. The rebellious woman does not lose the worn clothing that she had brought into the marriage. So that, according to this approach, the daughter-in-law is going to take that with her, and Rav Zvid's son is going to lose out on it. Omar Luhu Rav Gamda. Again, he reacts. And we continue at the top of Samach Dalam and Aleph. Mishum de Rav Zvid Gavra Rabahu Afchisu Lei Ladina Iluya. Because Rav Zvid is a great man, and in this sense he's a great man. He's a humble individual, and he won't protest what you say. Out of modesty, he'll remain quiet. He'll accept the loss. How can you rule so with such certainty in favor of the daughter-in-law and against Rav Zvid, is Rav Zvid's son, when this issue is something that hasn't been resolved? Hashta, the Gemara makes a point now. It takes a few lines. Hashta de lo itmar lo hachi v'lo hachi. At this point, then it hasn't been decided this way or that way. If the woman who is moredes, if she grabs on to the those worn clothing, then we won't take it away from her. If she grabbed it, she's holding on to it, so she can walk out with it. Lo tafsa, if she didn't grab it, she's rebelling, but her wardrobe, her worn out wardrobe, is located somewhere else, so she hasn't grabbed it. Lo Yahavino Lo. We won't deliver it to her, won't give it to her. Umashinon Lo Tresar Yarchi Shasa Agita. And we delay in the giving of the get. Tresar is 12. Yarchi, 12. Yarchi is months of the year. 12 basically means we wait a year. agita, until the giving of the get, ubahanoch treser yarchi shasa less law mazoni bibal, and during those 12 months she does not receive food support from her husband. And Rashi points out this whole point of delay is maybe she will change her mind.